Hello, I'm Professor Kino, and welcome to my Office of Cinematic Antiquity. Today we will be continuing the series of my top 10 favorite films. Coming in at number 8 is... When it comes to film remakes, there is one important thing that needs to be done. The remake needs to stand on its own. While most remakes fail at this by merely retreading the same ground as the original, John Carpenter's July 25, 1982 film The Thing does not. The original 1951 The Thing from Another World was heavily influenced by the US's post-World War II enthusiasm in that the film's threat was very visible and overcome by a group of people working together. John Carpenter's The Thing, on the other hand, was more influenced by the Cold War's fear of communism. From the Cuban Missile Crisis in '62 to the Vietnam War between '55 and '75 to Ronald Reagan's insistence that communism was the true evil in various speeches throughout the early '80s, the mindset of the US in the 1980s was far different than that of the mindset of the US in the 1950s. The evil that was so easily visible in World War II was now more obscure. Anyone could be the enemy. Consequently, when Carpenter decided to remake The Thing from Another World, he dropped the From Another World part of the title to, whether consciously or not, imply that this new threat was among us, and perhaps not even extraterrestrial. Through this, the feeling of paranoia became the focus of the remake, and because of this, The Thing has been heralded as one of the best film remakes to have ever been created. Premise: in a secluded U.S. research base in Antarctica, something infiltrates the crew that can shapeshift into anyone and anything. As crew members keep getting killed off, paranoia rises in the surviving members as they all try to survive and uncover who in the base is a thing. Writing: this film is all about assimilation and the feeling of paranoia, and the screenwriter Bill Lancaster achieves this effectively by crafting the story in an understandable cause-to-effect fashion. The first act of the film is all about the mystery. After the main title shows a crashing spaceship, the audience is greeted by a dog running away from a helicopter that contains two men from a Nordic Antarctic base trying to kill it. Eventually, we end up at the US Antarctic base. The dog gets taken in, and the apparently insane Norwegians get killed. The rest of the opening act is all about mystery. Why did the Norwegians go insane? Why were they trying to kill the dog? Etc., etc. And, as more consistently weird and creepy clues start to reveal themselves, the questions turn from a why to a what. What is it that the Norwegians found? Then, when the second act starts and the thing reveals itself, panic begins to dominate the film. It is quickly learned that the thing can shapeshift into anything and infect/convert anyone, and that the chances of it having infected one of the crew in the time it was in the base is quite high. Thus, the film's second act elevates the first act's mystery by injecting a heavy dose of panic and paranoia. The crew scrambles about the base, trying to uncover who in their midst is a thing. Then, by the time the film reaches its third act and who the thing is more or less known, the film shifts its paranoia to its next logical position: destruction. So, the third act becomes a more action-heavy film, but not at the expense of its mystery and paranoia. And finally, the film ends on a perfect cliffhanger that is the only logical way for a film about paranoia to end effectively, by ending on uncertainty. One aspect of this story that makes the film's paranoia even more effective is its use of characters. While none of them are too distinguishable besides the hero, R.J. MacReady, this actually does the film a service by making it more difficult for the audience to guess who the thing is among its whopping 12 characters. While the lack of strong characters definitely is a flaw in the film's writing, it does not harm the message of paranoia that the film is trying to convey. And this is not to say that you can't tell the characters apart, because each of them has a unique look, job title, and each gets a moment to shine. It's just that instead of seeing any of them and going, oh, that's so-and-so, you end up seeing them and going, oh, that's that guy. Because of this, however, when the characters split up or go off on their own, it is more difficult to guess who the thing is because everyone, besides MacReady, is presented to the audience equally. There's not a single character that ever feels like, oh, well, he got the least character development, so he's obviously going to be the first to go. Thus, when it comes to the progression of events, the audience is consistently left wondering who did what, who the thing had close contact with, and where it might have happened, because all of the characters, besides MacReady, get a relatively equal amount of screen time. Consequently, the feelings of paranoia and fear more easily emanate off the screen and onto the audience. Acting. Kurt Russell plays the more or less main character, R.J. MacReady, the resident helicopter pilot. Russell brings his typical charisma and badassery to the role, but that is all MacReady really is, a typical 1980s badass hero. He drinks, he's stern, but he is also trustworthy, has great leadership skills, and great one-liners. Russell plays this great, but it is nothing too unique. As for the other actors, they all do the material that they are given justice and are perfectly believable. If there are any standouts among them, they would be Keith David as Childs, the chief mechanic, and Wilford Brimley as Blair, the senior biologist. They both have excellent interactions with Russell and the other crew, and some very standout scenes that give each of their characters a little more personality comparatively than the rest. And as for the rest, they all, as mentioned, play their roles perfectly fine, but are not very standout. These include Thomas Waits as Windows, the radio operator, Richard Masur as Clark, the dogs handler, T.K. Carter as Knowles, the cook, Richard Dysart as Dr. Copper, the physician, Charles Hallahan as Norris, the geologist, Donald Moffat as M.T. Gary, the station manager, Peter Maloney as George Bennings, the meteorologist, David Clennon as Palmer, the assistant mechanic, and Joel Polis as Fuchs, the assistant biologist. And finally, I wanted to mention the dog that is running away from the helicopter in the beginning. I'm not sure if he was one dog or a few dogs that played him, but he does a great job in this film. He's cute, as most dogs are, but also seems to have an agenda. He is shown watching everything and seems to want something. It is amazingly well done, and his performance just adds to the film's overall paranoia and creepy feeling. Costumes, hair, and makeup. The humans themselves are nothing stand out. They wear winter attire when outside and various inside clothes while inside that help distinguish them from each other. For instance, Clark wears a plaid button-down shirt, Knowles wears a headband, etc., etc. Besides that, though, it is nothing crazy. The standouts here are the makeup, prosthetics, and animatronics by Rob Bottin. It is because of films like this that make me wish practical effects were still as common today as they were back in the 80s, because, to be honest, if this film was done with CGI instead of with makeup, prosthetics, and animatronics, it would not be the same. Because of its realism, one of the scenes in this movie involving a defibrillator is still one of the most, in my opinion, terrifying horror scenes of film history. If you're interested in the making of that scene, I'll put a link to Cinefix's dissection of it in the description below this video. Set design. The sets by John M. Dwyer are spectacular. Everything feels cramped, but still spread out enough that you can imagine a monster being able to sneak around it. It is decorated like an Antarctic base should be, with a generator room, a radio room, a kitchen, etc. When the characters are around, everything feels claustrophobic, but when they're not, everything feels horrifically desolate. It is a strange feeling to capture, and the Antarctic base does it marvelously. And as for the outside of the base, everything is desolate and cold-looking during the day, and even more so during the night when it is dark, the wind is blowing, and the snow is billowing. It all just adds to the feelings of seclusion and paranoia. It is simply phenomenal. Choreography. There are plenty of action scenes here that are handled expertly that include actors, animatronics, prosthetics, makeup, and weapons that all interchange and flow seamlessly and in such a manner that you see enough of what's going on to understand it, but also just little enough for everything to maintain that cramped and paranoid feeling. There are so many components that it is amazing how there is never a single time during the action scenes that it makes you feel like, oh well, they just switched out things here and obviously did that then during the filming. Everything feels perfectly natural and realistic, and it all flows wonderfully. Cinematography. Part of how the choreography and set design work so excellently to produce the feelings of claustrophobia, paranoia, and panic is with how Dean Cundy, the director of photography, set everything up. The lights are dim when they need to obscure the identities of people. The creepy animatronics and prosthetics are hidden just enough to show them off, but also leave plenty to the imagination. The actors are positioned just right with each other so that everyone is visible. Everything is done excellently. Editing. Part of what makes the action scenes so good is through the order in which everything is edited. The order in which the shots are strung together makes everything natural and does not make anything stand out as fake. Being able to do that is an art, and this film does it spectacularly. And other than that, the film is also just excellent. During the slow build-up scenes, the edits are unnoticeable unless you force yourself to look for them. Everything lingers on what you need to see for the perfect amount of time to make the whole movie flow and feel perfect. Since there is no CGI, we will move to the next category, music. Ennio Morricone makes a haunting score. It is very synthetic, but it is not overpowering. It sits in the back of your skull during the scenes and does not overshadow what is happening. It perfectly captures the feeling of paranoia, the sinking feeling that something is not right in the back of your mind. This is also a good place to discuss sound design, particularly that of The Thing. In one word, perfect. It is a sound that still spooks me every time I hear it. It is otherworldly, but still realistic and believable. You can hear pain and agony, but also hate it and like that it is hurting because it is just not right. It is exactly as it should be. Direction. This is one of Carpenter's best works by far. Haunting, terrifying, horrific, and paranoia-inducing throughout. Additionally, since this is also a remake, it is an even more stellar achievement on Carpenter's part to have made something equally good, if not better, than the original. My enjoyment. This is hands down my favorite horror film. It is creepy, it is mysterious, it is fun, and it is unexpected. This film got me hooked on a John Carpenter movie watching spree, but after finishing most of his, I keep coming back to this one. When it comes to horror films, I think that this is a top tier entry. I love it. Recommendations. This film is for horror fans, gore fans, fans of practical effects, and for people who like thrillers, creepy feelings, and horrific sensations, and don't mind weaker characters. The thing is not for people who dislike graphic content, hate seeing animals get harmed, hate cliffhangers, or for people who need to have very compelling characters in the movies that they watch. If you're on the fence, however, give the thing a chance. It is a wondrous achievement in the field of remakes, practical effects, and horror. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked it. If you did, leave a like. If you want to see more, please subscribe. I will be continuing this series of my top 10 favorite films in my next video. Until then, I am Professor Kino, and I look forward to our next discussion.